So let's start. Number 10, the technical alibi. Clinically tested sits on the label in bold. No outcome listed, no result stated, just those two words, and your brain promotes them into something the label never actually claimed. That phrase means exactly one thing. A product went through some kind of process at some point. Whether anyone improved, whether the study was controlled, whether a single meaningful result came out of it, none of that is part of the claim. Specifying those things would require answers the company either does not have or is not willing to share. A rock can be clinically tested. A placebo can be clinically tested. A compound with no mechanism and no demonstrated effect can be clinically tested. Think about what that means. The phrase confirms that something occurred somewhere. It says nothing about what that something produced. But placed in bold type on the right packaging, your brain reads it as near confirmation of effectiveness. The psychological explanation is called the truth default theory. You are not built to interrogate every sentence you encounter. Processing each phrase with full skepticism would exhaust cognitive energy no person actually has. So your brain defaults to trust. It accepts communication as broadly honest unless something obvious enough forces a second look. A flat false claim might trip that wire. A carefully constructed, technically accurate non-claim almost never does. This is exactly why the approach changed. Outright false advertising became legally dangerous. Tighter regulation and a more scientifically aware consumer base made fabrication a genuine liability. The strategy adapted, not toward honesty, but toward precision ambiguity. Up to 50% improvement is defensible. If 3 people out of 1,000 hit that ceiling, no added sugar holds legally even when other sweeteners carry the full load. Made with real ingredients stands when the real content accounts for 0.5% of the formula. Every claim survives a fact check. Not one means what you assumed it did. The gap between the words and reality is calculated to be exactly large enough to do the job and exactly small enough to avoid exposure. Your brain writes the optimistic version of every ambiguous phrase. The company just leaves the page blank. Number 9, the naked number. A product announces 200% improvement in performance. Something engages, transformation, measurable results, progress at a scale that actually matters. Now add the detail that was never mentioned. The baseline performance was 1. It is now 3. That is your 200% improvement. 2 additional units of whatever vaguely defined metric the test chose to track. Accurate, but almost entirely uninformative. Your brain treats numbers as inherently meaningful the moment they appear, even when they arrive with no surrounding context. A figure sounds precise. Precision feels like rigor. Rigor creates the impression of credibility. Companies have learned to move along that entire chain without breaking a single link in it. This is called numerical anchoring. When a number enters your awareness, it becomes your reference point before your mind has had time to ask what it is measuring. You register the figure as significant. The question, compared to what, arrives late in the process if it arrives at all. By then, the impression is already set. 9 out of 10 users prefer who were those users, how many participated, and who recruited them. Backed by a study, was it peer-reviewed, what was the sample size, and who funded it? Reduces risk by 30% because absolute risk reduction and relative risk reduction describe entirely different realities, and the gap between them can be enormous when the baseline risk is small. A study of 12 people can be packaged as compelling supporting evidence for a mass market claim. Context is what converts a number from impressive to meaningful. Strip the context and the number still registers, it just registers incorrectly. Companies used to sell outcomes. They promised results directly. Now they sell pieces of evidence and let your mind finish the picture. Because once you believe you reasoned your way to a conclusion independently, you trust that conclusion far more deeply than if someone handed it to you. A lie you helped assemble is almost impossible to argue yourself out of. Number 8, the nature trick. Count how many products on a single store shelf carry the word natural. Natural skincare, natural snacks, natural cleaning products, natural energy. At some point in the last decade, that single word became the most overloaded term in consumer marketing, attached to everything, implying everything, meaning almost nothing in legal terms. The psychological mechanism underneath it is called the appeal to nature bias. It is the built-in human tendency to assume that things derived from nature are inherently better than things engineered in a lab, that natural means safe, that natural means beneficial, that the absence of synthetic intervention is itself a form of quality assurance. The logic feels sound until you test it against what nature actually contains. Arsenic occurs naturally in the Earth's crust. Lead is natural. Mercury is natural. Every disease-causing pathogen on this planet is entirely natural. The word describes origin. It carries no information about whether something will help or harm you. But the emotional weight it delivers says something very different. And that emotional weight is the entire transaction. Growing scientific awareness about synthetic additives made consumers more cautious about certain ingredients. Companies noticed instead of fighting that caution with evidence, they redirected it with framing. They stopped trying to prove superior performance and started implying superior purity. Not this delivers better results, that requires data. Just this comes from a better place. Not this is safer, that requires clinical backing. Just this contains fewer chemicals, which is technically accurate for most things, since listing fewer ingredients on a label is not the same as containing fewer of them. The word natural carries no standardized regulatory definition in most consumer industries. That is not a gap waiting to be filled, it is a feature. An undefined word bends to accommodate almost any product. Marketing does not need verification, it needs resonance. Once your purchasing decision runs on emotional association rather than measurable outcome, the burden of proof disappears. An undefined word can mean anything, and anything is exactly what they need. Number 7, borrowed science. Two products sit on the same shelf. Both carry the label science-backed. One claims its key ingredient extends longevity. The other claims the same ingredient accelerates cellular damage. Both reference studies. Both state the claim with full confidence. You stand there holding both boxes with no clear way to choose between them. People are conditioned to treat scientific support as a binary. Either evidence exists or it does not. If a study is cited, the claim becomes true. Not conditional, not context-dependent, not subject to the size or quality of the study or who paid for it. Just true. And companies understood long ago that they do not need all the science, they just need a piece of it. This is cherry-picking, and it is far less risky than fabricating results. A fabricated finding can be disproven. A real study, however small, however underpowered, however isolated from the broader body of research, is still a real study. You cannot argue it out of existence. You can only surround it with context, and that context rarely makes it onto the packaging. It works because of confirmation bias. When you already want a claim to be true, when you're hoping your preferred product is actually doing something, a single supporting study is exactly enough to feel justified. You're not looking for contrary evidence. The 10 conflicting studies that did not make the label are invisible because you did not go looking for them and the company had no reason to point you there. So the phrases carry the load. Studies show, which ones, how many, what methodology, research suggests. That word suggests is doing enormous work in that sentence. Backed by science, whose science, what conditions, and sponsored by whom. Modern science is built on debate, replication, and ongoing revision. That is what makes it reliable over time. But it also means that for almost any position, you can find a study pointing that direction. Companies exploit that natural variance. The game stopped being about being right. It became about finding something that sounds right and making it prominent. Once that claim lands where your existing beliefs live, it is very hard to dislodge. Number 6, the ghost expert. A product carries the label doctor recommended, no name follows, no specialty listed, no institution cited, no explanation of what the doctor evaluated, under what circumstances, or on what basis the recommendation was made. Just the phrase sitting on the packaging with the weight of a credential it never actually provides. Your brain does something immediate when it receives that signal. It relaxes. Someone qualified looked at this. The evaluation has already been done by a person with the training to do it properly. You can stop asking questions. That is the intended outcome, and it lands even though the label gave you nothing concrete to verify. This is the authority bias in operation. Humans defer to perceived experts, particularly in domains where they lack direct knowledge themselves. It is a rational adaptation in most situations. Medicine, engineering, and law are fields where expertise genuinely matters, and most people genuinely lack it. That same reflex gets triggered in contexts where the authority is a constructed impression rather than a real credential. So instead of a named physician endorsing a specific formulation based on cited clinical evidence, you get doctor approved. Instead of a listed researcher with a reference publication, you get expert formulated. Instead of a trial with reported results, you get scientifically designed. These phrases carry the tone of authority without providing anything you could actually look up, verify, or question. Your brain does not reliably catch the distinction. Once it receives the signal that someone qualified was involved, it fills in everything else. Surely the testing was thorough, surely a real expert reviewed it, but surely is not evidence. It is confidence wearing the right outfit. Scientific literacy has made people more cautious as a general disposition, but caution is not the same as analysis. The shift was from being authoritative to appearing authoritative. The packaging does not need a real credential, it only needs the shape of one. For most purchasing decisions, that shape closes the gap entirely. A ghost expert still carries the weight of a real one. The packaging just never names them. Number 5, the buried truth. Somewhere at the bottom of the advertisement, in type that requires genuine effort to read, is the actual truth. It has always been there. It is technically present on every ad that runs it, and it is completely invisible to nearly everyone who encounters it. Your brain processes a message in sequence. The large, bold headline registers first. The subheading follows. The smaller supporting copy comes after that. By the time your attention reaches the fine print at the bottom, it has already moved on. Companies understand this sequencing more precisely than most people understand it about themselves. The layout is not random, it is engineered around exactly where your focus lives and exactly where it drifts once the primary message lands. This is cognitive load. Your brain operates with finite processing capacity. When you're already engaged with something exciting or emotionally compelling, the bandwidth left for scrutinizing supplemental text drops sharply. Regulatory pressure forced brands to disclose real information. So they complied. They put the real information in the smallest font the guidelines allow, in the densest language they can defensibly use at the bottom of the frame. The headline says, "Lose weight fast." The fine print explains that results vary significantly, that outcomes shown require strict dietary changes and consistent exercise, and that the product alone demonstrates no independent documented effect. The headline says, "Boosts energy instantly." The fine print notes, the effect is temporary and is not a substitute for adequate sleep. The offer says risk-free trial. The fine print reveals it auto-renews at full price after 7 days, with fees that appeared nowhere in the main copy. The legal standard for disclosure is presence, not readability. Information only needs to exist somewhere on the material, not prominently, not legibly, not in plain language. Companies did not fight that standard. They built an entire communication structure around it. This is not deception in any traditional legal sense. It is something more deliberate. The architectural separation of what you notice from what is actually true, built by people who have studied exactly how your attention works. The truth never disappeared. They just made it small enough to functionally not exist. Number 4, words without weight. The word healthy used to carry enough definition that you could hold a product against it and get a legible answer. Then the word got stretched. Then it got borrowed. Then it got attached to enough things outside its original territory that it now functions largely as decoration. You pick up a package in an aisle. It says healthy in clean font on the front. Your brain immediately connects that word to positive associations, nutritional value, physical benefit, something that does something good in your body. The product might be loaded with refined sugar and minimal nutrition. The connection your brain made was automatic and real. The claim was neither. This happens because of semantic drift, the gradual process by which words expand, soften, or shift in meaning through repeated use in new contexts. Marketing accelerates that process at a rate that has no natural equivalent. A word gets deployed across enough different products and categories, and the anchor of its original meaning starts to give way. Once tighter regulations lock down specific nutritional claims, companies move to vocabulary that sounds meaningful without being tightly defined enough to be held accountable. Clean has no standardized regulatory meaning in most consumer product industries. Wellness evokes medicine without committing to any medical standard. Boosts immunity gestures toward a physiological outcome without specifying a measurable mechanism. Naturally balanced is a phrase designed to feel like information while delivering none. Your brain does not automatically stop and ask what that term means in measurable terms. It recognizes the word, connects it to familiar associations, and moves on. Familiarity generates trust. That trust replaces the need for evidence. Companies do not need to win a scientific argument if they can position the conversation inside a word that precise standards have not gotten around to pinning down yet. This is not traditional deception. No false fact is being stated. It is linguistic flexibility, the exploitation of vocabulary that sounds rigorous while remaining entirely unaccountable to rigor. Words without meaning can still do a lot of work. Number 3, feeling over fact. A testimonial. Someone on screen, clearly sincere, looking directly at you, saying that a product changed their life. The delivery is warm. And something shifts in you that no statistic, no bar chart, no controlled clinical result would have moved. Your brain ranked that story above the data. Not because the story contains stronger evidence. Large-scale controlled research is far more reliable than a single personal account, but because the story was vivid, human, and immediate. And vivid, human, and immediate is how your brain decides what is worth believing. This is called the availability heuristic. Your brain estimates what is true or probable based on what is easiest to call to mind. A memorable story occupies mental space in a way that an abstract figure cannot. You can picture the person, you can connect to something in what they felt. A statistic describing outcomes across 2,000 participants does not produce that. It stays abstract, weightless, easy to discount as scientific scrutiny of data claims increased, making hard quantitative assertions became more legally and reputationally risky. But a personal experience cannot be challenged the way a methodology can. You cannot run a replication study on someone's story. You cannot request the raw data from a testimonial. So companies shifted their structure of proof from numbers toward narrative. Instead of this product improved outcomes by 12% in a controlled trial, you get a name, a face, a struggle, and a moment when things turned around. The problem is that a single story is not representative evidence. One person's result carries no predictive power for yours. What they were eating, how they were sleeping, what else changed in their life at the same time. None of that appears in the 2-minute video. The testimonial is carefully selected, highly relatable, and nearly impossible to fact-check in any meaningful way. The emotional beat was placed where it would land hardest. What looks like a genuine personal experience is a packaged unit of persuasion built to bypass the part of your brain that asks for evidence. Once you feel something, logic enters the conversation late and without leverage. The feeling is real. The evidence it represents often is not. Number 2, the honesty flood. Imagine being handed all at once the full ingredient breakdown, the detailed sourcing documentation, the manufacturing process explanation, the sustainability impact assessment, and the clinical background summary for a single product you're considering buying. Now imagine that reading all of it carefully would take the better part of an afternoon. Nobody does that. Companies have built an entire strategy around the fact that nobody does. Scientific pressure and regulatory requirements began demanding that brands disclose more. The era of running entirely on headline claims with no documentation became harder to sustain. So brands complied. They put out everything, all at once, in full detail, technically accessible to anyone willing to find it. This is information overload, and its effect on the brain is the opposite of what more information sounds like it should produce. When the volume of data exceeds what your mind can comfortably process, it does not become more careful or more analytical. It becomes more passive. It looks for shortcuts. It falls back on signals rather than substance. And the signal that becomes available when information is abundant is the mere presence of information itself. Your brain interprets the volume of disclosed material as evidence of integrity. The logic runs roughly like this. They are showing everything, every ingredient, every source, every data point, which must mean they have nothing to conceal. That conclusion feels reasonable. It is based entirely on perception and not at all on whether you actually read any of what was provided. A company does not need to lie. It does not need to conceal. It only needs to generate more pages than a person will reasonably get through, place them somewhere technically accessible, and let your brain register the pile as proof of honesty. You feel informed. That feeling turns off the questioning. The information was always there. It was just arranged so you would never quite reach the parts that mattered. Number 1, borrowed belief. Think about the last thing you purchased that you did not fully understand. Not because you were careless, because the product was genuinely complex, the claims layered on top of each other, the mechanism unclear, and yet you bought it. Not because you evaluated it directly, because enough other people appeared to have already done that on your behalf. 5 stars, 4,000 reviews, an influencer who mentioned it casually the way they mention anything that is simply part of their day. Your brain ran a calculation you were not conscious of, arrived at something that felt like confidence, and the purchase happened. This is social proof. When a person faces genuine uncertainty, the kind that comes from not being able to evaluate something directly, they look to others, not to strangers in the abstract, but to visible people making visible choices. If enough of them appear to trust something, the brain treats that apparent collective judgment as data. Not opinion, not coincidence, data. Scientific complexity accelerated this. The gap between what is claimed about a product and what most people can independently verify has never been wider. So they do the only rational thing available. Delegate the judgment to people who appear to have done the work. Here's where it breaks down. The signals being delegated to are not neutral. Reviews can be filtered before publication or generated under incentive structures that are never made visible to you. Influencers are frequently compensated, even when disclosure is technically present. Algorithms surface what performs well in engagement terms, not what is accurate or representative of actual outcomes. The crowd appears to be making an independent collective judgment. In many cases, it is a curated projection of consensus rather than an organic one. Companies once built credibility by saying, "Trust us." Now they say, "Trust them." And them feels organic and is often anything but. The lie no longer comes from the brand. It comes from everywhere around you. You never see the source. You only see the agreement. And that is the most effective form of persuasion ever built. One where you never register that you were persuaded. That's it for this one. More is coming. Subscribe so you catch it. See you in the next.